You worked in the CIA. How do you interpret the intelligence assessments then that supported this idea that NATO needed to expand? I mean, were there dissenting views within the intelligence community, like regarding the potential risk of this? They're saying CIA, the State Department, we need to expand. We need to expand. We need to expand NATO. And yet what you're pointing out is that Russia was actually shrinking. The size of its military was shrinking. So what were they basing this on?
It was based entirely upon the intervention of the U.S. military, the Lockheed Martins, the Raytheons, the General Dynamics, the Boeings. You know, there's money to be made there. And money's not going to be made if you're not, number one, if you're not having to sell these new weapon systems to these new NATO partners. You know, that was part of the scam. You bring these people in and then they got to, hey, so we can have interoperability, you got to buy our stuff. You know, if there were dissenting voices at the CIA, they didn't last long. Remember, this is a bureaucracy. You don't get promoted and put into leadership position by being a contrarian, by saying something that the White House doesn't want to hear. And the White House didn't want to hear this. It was, Clayton, there were public voices like George Kennan, who had been sort of the father of the Cold War in some aspects, coming out and saying, this is crazy. There's no need to expand NATO. In fact, NATO has outlived its usefulness. Don't do this. Bill Burns, the recent CIA director under Biden, who had been a U.S. ambassador in Moscow, wrote that famous cable in 2008 that said, with respect to expanding NATO into Ukraine and Georgia, it's a red line for the Russians. They'll fight it. Niet means niet. What's interesting is you go back and look at that period from December of 2007, when Vladimir Putin spoke at the Munich Security Conference. Just remember, we just had a Munich Security Conference a couple of months back where J.D. Vance spoke. And oh boy, it created a real uproar because basically he told the Europeans they were acting like a bunch of authoritarian thugs and to stop it, you know. Well, it was at that kind of setting that Vladimir Putin spoke and warned against the expansion of NATO. And then in March of 2008, you had the NATO conference, and he again appeared at that NATO conference, and Putin made very direct threats even that if you guys persist in doing this, we're going to have to take counteractions. And then it was in August of 2008, at the instigation of the West, that you had these two territories inside Georgia erupt and attack Russian positions, and the Russians responded, shut it down within 2 weeks. But that then all evolved until we get to 2014, the Maidan. And we just learned in the last week from a documentary being prepared about Putin's 25 years in leadership that Russia wanted to respond militarily to what happened in Maidan in 2014. But he said we were economically and militarily unprepared to do it. And so they spent the next 8 years getting ready. And it was, again, this was provoked. At no point, you know, all Donald Trump had to do was tell the Pentagon during his time, hey, we're going to cut back on these military exercises on the borders of Russia. It's too provocative. We don't need to establish new bases in Poland and Romania. Too provocative. I'm not selling javelins to the Ukrainians. But Trump didn't do it. He did just the opposite. So you can't sit there and pretend now like he's some neutral mediator when he's as much a facilitator of this bloodshed as Joe Biden or Barack Obama.
It's a great point. You know, one thing that sticks out to me, though, is that all of this, everything that you've documented here, all of these NATO exercises inside of Ukraine, the expansion, the money, the weapons, the expansion of the Ukrainian army, basically as a NATO proxy.
Right.
All in an effort to destabilize and destroy Russia. Why did they stop at keeping Ukraine out of NATO? I mean, by all accounts, they are a member of NATO.
Yeah.
Why just keeping the name? Why just not allowing them to have full membership in NATO? What was that strategy? Because wouldn't that have done more to provoke Russia by officially bringing them into NATO than not?
Well, I think that was their fear, that if they crossed that line, that Russia would have been compelled to act with even more force militarily. Understand that there are two papers that were written for the U.S. government. One was by Rand Corporation in 2019. It was, I think, produced for both DoD and the intelligence community. And it talked about how they needed to take efforts to basically weaken Russia. What could we do to weaken Russia? And all of this with an eye towards what to do about China. Now, see, this is not just about Russia. This is about China and about the United States maintaining what the U.S. perceives as its control of the world. Then in December, October of 2020, a paper was written by one Aaron Wes Mitchell. And Mitchell, who had been a senior foreign diplomat in Trump's State Department, wrote this paper that basically laid out the strategy that what we need to do is use Ukraine as a wedge, attack Russia, defeat Russia, and in Russia's defeat, Russia will be compelled to come to the West, and then we can use Russia against China. That was the strategy. It's laid out in the paper. People can go read it. It's in the national interest, published national interest in August of 2021, but it was submitted to the Pentagon's Office of Net Assessments about 11 months earlier. So this was an actual plan within the U.S. government, a strategic vision that we're going to start a war with Russia, use Ukraine to defeat Russia, and then use the Russians against the Chinese. You know, this stuff it's sick, it's diabolical, it's something, you know, you think I'm making this up. Not my word. Right. Just go read it. It's in black and white. And A. Wes Mitchell can then come and argue why he didn't mean it, but it is what it is.